think it did. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Welcome to wasmCloud Wednesday for Wednesday, the 27th. This week, as it is Turkey Day week here in the US, is we kind of figured that it would be a little quieter. We've got kind of a quick agenda. But before we get started, actually, two of the community members that I wanted to thank are here, so I'll go ahead and thank them. First of all, Florian, we actually just merged your PR into the documentation site around wasmCloud, the scaling test, which was awesome. I want to thank you so much for some of your continued iteration on that and like patience with us reviewing it as the whole conference season was happening. So that was awesome to see. Um, and Masood, I wanted to extend a really heartfelt thank you for the involvement that you've had in the Wasm Cloud community over well, I mean, really many months, but it's so often these days, especially on a busy day, that someone new will come into the Wasm Cloud community and say, hey, I have this beginner question, or I've been having trouble getting this set up, and often you are one of the ones that will respond first to new folks. So, you know, I think that part of the best thing about us doing open source is the community, and it just really that's the thing that I'm thankful for this year. Having people like you who are in there, being the Wasm Cloud community and helping people out. So,
I don't
um,
think if I have said it before or not, Brooks, but I'm just imitating the masters. So you guys have always been quite helpful, answering questions, pointing to code, and all sorts of support that you're providing to the community. And I'm just trying to do an Utah in return for the community. But thank you.
yeah. Well, hey, oh, Florian,
Uh,
yeah, go.
Yeah, I want also to say thank you. It was actually an awesome experience. So my first PR for wasmCloud. So many thanks also for taking care of it actually, and also giving it the last where so the polishing, finding all the small typos. I'm sorry for that. So it was really good, and I'm looking for the next one for sure.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, that is such a high value piece of our documentation. It's what everyone will run through during the quick start. So being able to see that is, it's a very important piece of people starting Wasm Cloud. So I think, I mean, this is only kind of a microcosm of a discussion, but this is all really just to say that I am so proud of the community as it is today, grown so much over the past year. I think we'll have to do some kind of end of year retrospective on the whole community. But anyways, before I get too sappy and get obsessed with that, why don't we get on with the regular agenda, which should be pretty quick here today. Some of the things that we are looking at are some of the new blogs and documentation that's come across over the past couple weeks. What we'll do is we'll talk about our recent story around S-bombs in Wasm Cloud, do a quick little roadmap check and see how we're doing, and then of course call out to some of the session playlists going live. So should be great. Should be a pretty quick agenda. We'll have some time in the end for questions and topics as well. So first and foremost, securing software supply chains with Wasm Cloud. What, how, why? There's a ton of investment in the cloud native, just the general security ecosystem for this thing called a software bill of materials or an SBOM for short, which mostly revolves around the idea of being able to trace back an individual deployment artifact or binary to the original versions of the source libraries that was used to build it. And very, very important in the enterprise software world, because if there was a vulnerability in some library, ideally there is a tooling that from something like an SBOM, you would be notified all of the deployment artifacts, all the applications, all the infrastructure that you have deployed that depends on that specific library or that specific CVE. So I, this kind of tooling is actually not something that is very important for people who are deploying wasmCloud applications because WebAssembly is a little different than a container, and there is a lot of tooling around binaries and containers. And this blog really just highlights the ability to generate SBOMs using the common open source tools like Sift and Gripe. And then I think there's one called Trivy as well. Um, this blog kind of goes into kind of what I just talked about and why this is important, and then talks about generating SBOMs for Wasm Cloud projects. It's really nothing too complex. It's the same as generating it for like a Rust or a Go binary or maybe a TypeScript project where you have the source project that you can build, and then you can use a tool like Sift to generate the SBOM from the cargo.lock, like the original from the original libraries that you use to build the component. And what you'll notice from this is very often this SBOM is going to be shorter, smaller than you're used to. And a lot of that is because of the interface driven mode or the capability driven mode that components execute in and are written to. So you may have a component that uses HTTP, uses key value, uses messaging, uses logging at runtime. But the only actual dependency that the component has when you build it is with bindgen or something that generates those interfaces locally. So it's important when we're considering the SBOMs that these components actually remove quite a bit of what would normally show up as a vulnerable library in the SBOM itself. Nonetheless, very, very important to have this kind of tooling so that we can generate this nice clean SBOM. And you can do this for components and capability providers alike. So if you're looking for more information on this, you can find the SBOM bit on our blog. I think it's actually the second to most recent one. Or if you search our documentation site for SBOM, there is actually a page under the operator guide, under security, and then SBOM that will talk about essentially the same content that is in the blog. I don't think we have another page here. Yeah, same page there. So it is very, very important to be able to generate this. And we've gotten a lot of questions from the folks at bigger enterprises that have SBOM tooling that they say, well, how do I generate this? So great thing to look out for. Do folks have any questions on the SBOM bit?
Here, so you said a few words about how to generate it, but are there any plans actually how to use it, or is that up to the user?
Right now, just to be clear, basically what we have talked about is, wasmCloud tooling won't make use of the SBOM really in any way. So it would be just up to the user, take this outputted SBOM, whether it's SPDX or I forget the other one, and then use it in your existing tooling. What we've seen is that the enterprises, the big companies, the ones who have the security infrastructure to try to care about, or sorry, to have the requirement for an SBOM, they already have, existing infrastructure to handle it. Does that make sense or kind of get at what your question was?
Yes, definitely. So locking in the dark was actually the question if there's some. So in Kubernetes, for example, you have admission controllers like Kubernetes, for example, which can also use SBOMs for checking or for denying or allowing images based on findings or results. So, but as you said, this is out of scope, at least for now, for Wasm Cloud.
That actually does bring up a great point, though, that this might, I think that the integration point here would be something like the Wasm Cloud policy server or the policy service. This is something that when you start this basically fills the role of an admission controller in Wasm Cloud, where you can have a pluggable service or pluggable policy that you can add further constraints on the components that you want to start in a Wasm Cloud host. Now, I think what we would need here for this to be supported is to make sure that if there was there may need to be some tooling around like an optional ability to embed an SBOM into a component, like that actual output format. And then that could be sent along to the policy server. That would probably be the existing point. And I think that sorry, your clarification reminded me of it. This would be where we would do it, but that would all be in the name of a user or an operator defining like a rule for a specific SBOM.
Well, okay, many thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Masood, go ahead. Maybe you were you just raising your hand to answer that one?
I'm sorry, I'm talking on mute.
Oh, whoops.
I was just mentioning that I do have an unpublished pipeline that adds provenance for wasmCloud components. I mean, the binaries, providers, and components. Actually, I took the wasmCloud pipeline and then modified it for my custom provider and then added provenance steps to it. And basically, it meets that level 2 or level 3, level 2, I think, that is there in Salsa. Again, because I delayed publishing the custom provider because I want to make some significant changes. I did not publish that, but potentially if one day we decide to kind of incorporate that in the pipeline, that might be useful.
Okay. Yeah, I think that I mean any additional pipeline is just a GitHub like additions to the GitHub action, right?
That's correct. It
Yeah.
adds a callable workflow to basically create the SBOM and then create the provenance for it and then add them to the image.
I think that kind of um I think that kind of addition would do really, really well, like with our Wasm Cloud examples. And we don't have to do it for every single example or anything like that, but it may be, I think that would be a great security example to have in the Wasm Cloud repo where we publish a component and, we don't do it for all our examples, but if you wanted to attach your SBOM or have provenance, be able to know which workflow, which repo this component came from, validate that with like an external tool, and then have that all as an example that people can copy from, that would be great. Um, I know that you said that maybe you were working on a couple of other things there, but speaking personally, Mr. I think that would be a great thing to add to our example.
To just clarify, I'm happy to share, of course, but to just clarify, I didn't work on the validation part because I just modified the wasmCloud pipeline on GitHub side to produce it, but validation I left it to the user, and for that maybe pairing it with an example would be good, and I can look into it and see how that can be achieved around holidays. Feel
Okay.
free.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I guess I can't speak for it to, how quickly somebody would be looking for it. Um, but it would be wonderful to point even the most basic, um, attestations and then validations would be really useful to be able to point at. It's one of those things that like you don't need it until you need it, and then all of a sudden, you have a need, somebody really wants it, so that would be great to have.
Okay, I'll look into it.
Thank you. Yeah, and feel free if, if there's a lot going on, feel free to open that as a draft PR. I know that some of the other folks on the wasmCloud maintainer side, like Jonas and like Dan, have worked on similar things before or are very passionate about the security bits.
Sure.
Alrighty. I think that probably ties it up pretty well for everybody's favorite topic, S-bombs. Why don't we go ahead and keep on moving here? Rest of the rest of the agenda today is really just a check-in and an announcement. So if we check in on the quarter 4 Wasm Cloud roadmap, I think we're doing a really great job. This one is actually, oh, that's in progress. Okay, great. We're doing a really great job. If we look back, just kind of doing a full rundown, this one feature that's still in triage probably deserves a little bit more attention from maybe me or Taylor. And it's not to say that either of us would need to actually fix the issue, but this is something that we have run into under really high, what is the right word? Not high frequency, but really
Low.
quickly deploying low.
Load. High load. Is
Load.
that what you're
Yes,
saying?
thank you.
Okay.
Really high load of deploying a bunch of different links individually for a component. There is a potential race condition which is not often hit, but something there. So I think just generally a re-examination since we added component specifications in 1.0, making sure that we're doing that in the right way would be good. So that's the reason why it's sitting there in triage. I just want to be clear that we probably need to add a little bit more information here, even though it is decently well specced out, like the scenario. More attention there. So apologies for kind of the delay on that side on the maintainer side. As far as what's ready for work, when I look at this list, I actually don't see a lot of large pieces here. This Wadham PR would be a great one to pick up as a new contributor to Wadham. There's already a little bit of precedent of taking an event and then reflecting an event that indicates a failure in the application status. I think it would be great if a provider said it was unhealthy to reflect the app as failed. And we don't exactly, this is something that is external to Wadham. So marking it as failed would be pretty well descriptive to say, hey, this is something that's failed. This needs to be addressed externally. And that could be, any provider health check can do this. It could be anything from like a failure to pull in or open a socket, or a failure to communicate with some external service, things like that. Then the other bits are really just a small bit of HTTP documentation, and then handling resources for custom capability providers. This one probably requires a little bit more expertise, but certainly there for the taking. Other than the things that are ready for work, we're making really good progress on lots of features here in the in progress. We probably should, probably worth checking in on these for the folks who are working on it, but many of these are being taken by community members, which is awesome. This wash control command is not requiring a host ID. There's already at least a draft PR that's out there that addresses it. Same with human time instead of milliseconds. Benchmarking suites is actually something that a lot of us on the maintainer side are working on right now, just like often running benchmarks. We do have the resources from the CNCF, like custom runners, and of course GitHub runners are free for open source. So I think that one is probably the progress is going really well there. The fully featured Wasm Cloud Quick Start is kind of more of an epic, like a long running issue, but the first bit of it is fantastic now. Florian, the piece that you added in that really ties home the scale and distribute bit is huge here. I think the only final thing is probably on me, which is that third page in the quick start where we override a dependency with changing from Nats key value to Redis key value. And that's something that we actually have more first-class support for in Wash Dev instead of editing the YAML. So if all of this just sounds like contextless gobbledygook, it's probably because I'm just spitballing it. But that's the last thing that I'd like to see from that one. So I'll take the last of the fully featured wasmCloud quick start. We got a great list of things that have been taken by a couple things have been completed by community members. We've intentionally kind of kept this roadmap a little bit quieter after what we've seen from the previous quarters, where often with wasmCloud, a lot of the work is kind of done on kind of on demand. If you look at how many PRs and things are coming across, where we're doing a ton of work, it can just be hard to predict everything that we need to do in a quarter for wasmCloud. In the plan, I really just like having the roadmap as something that contributors can come in and find the things that we've kind of brainstormed as a community and said, here are the important things. All right. Well, that I think is all that I wanted to say about the Q4 roadmap. Do folks have questions, comments, concerns on that one? Yeah, Masood, go ahead.
At most next week, I'm going to have the PR for the NATS blob store provider. I'm planning some interesting example that I want to keep as a surprise. But I do have a question for the maintainers, and I want to check before that PR happens to make sure that we're on the same page, or if I need to make any changes. I kind of broke with the norm, and I actually have broken down the provider into pieces. So there is a provider, there is a config as usual, but there is a provider and there is a lib. And then the interface that is being implemented, meaning that each interface is implemented in its own file, separate file. The reason that I did this is for two reasons. It adds like really, really minimal overhead, jumping between the files. But what it brings in, I think, is one is that it makes it easier to maintain. And the other one is that it makes it easier for new contributors to understand what are the pieces of a provider if they want to tackle that issue. But again, because in other providers, we kind of put everything into one file. Just wanted to, if I issue that PR, would not be considered like a disturbance to the
A disturbance to the refactoring force. That sounds great. So you have in your provider, it's the blob store NATS one, right?
That's correct.
So under your source or whatever, maybe you have a lib where you're setting up provider things, but then you also have like the container file and the blob store file and things like that.
Right, and because we kind of, in the next version, of course, the container and the blob store are being merged, and on the WRPC side, we do them all under one roof anyway. So there is only blob store file. But in general, if we take, for example, key value as an example, and it wanted to be like that, there will be one for, let's say, batch, one for, and that way, if you need to, let's say, change that. And it also helps that at a glance, you can say that which of the interfaces are missing for a provider. They have not been implemented yet because the file is not there.
Yeah, I think that sounds wonderful. I think that sounds like a great. Well, we'll look at it in the PR, of course, but I'm a huge fan. I think with wasmCloud, we have tended to kind of throw it all in one file in the name of speed and like kind of ease of editing things all in the same place. But the organization into providers aren't generally a ton of code, I guess, but the organization by interface makes a lot of sense to me, and I think it's what people would look for as well. I mean, I guess um, I'll give you my feedback that I think it's great. What do you folks think on this kind of difference where it's organized not just in one file, but just per interface?
I think Taylor is already making turkey.
Here, I think it may help to pull up pull up a little code. So if we take a look at here's part of the problem statement. Like if you wanted to come to a Wasm cloud provider, and Masood, you kind of use the key value example, so I'll roll with that. So you come into the Wasm cloud repository and you see, hey, great, here's the Redis key value provider. This provider is actually all implemented in this one function, which granted is, a couple hundred lines of code. It's nothing too huge here. But if you wanted to see the different interfaces that this provider implements, you can see at the top we're generating interfaces for Atomics, Batch, and Store. But scrolling down, we have the implementation of the provider, which is just our own custom functions. We have the implementation of key value store for this provider. We have the implementation of key value atomics, key value batch, and then we also have the implementation of the provider trait for KV Redis provider. All of this is happening in one file, so it's the entire implementation. And what Masood is proposing and going to PR for a new provider that he's written is that maybe the implementation of the provider trait will live in lib.rs, but the implementation for the batch trait or the batch interface would live in something like batch.rs. The implementation for atomics would live in atomics.rs, and then store would be under store.rs. So if you were coming to find, where a specific interface was implemented in a specific provider, you could actually take a look here at the source files and say, hey, I wanted to change something for atomics. So I'll go into atomics, and then the only thing in that file would be basically this function. Masood, am I representing that pretty well?
Yes.
Okay.
Except that I have separated also the provider. Again, I just kind of the lib is just the glue, right?
The lib is just yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the lib is where, kind of has to exist, I guess. But just the lib can just be basic, where the struct is defined and everything. Yeah,
So again, you could put comments on the PR. I just wanted to know that if you would be violently against breaking with the norm. So I thought I first ask.
Yeah, and thank you for asking. Not wildly against at all. After we take a look at this PR, I think it would be a good idea to, in the spirit of thinking back over the year, do a little retrospective about how our code is kind of organized in providers. And I think we can, from these two examples, we can decide which one generally folks would prefer. I would also just encourage that it's great for us to talk about here, like anything that you noticed a pattern, you were thinking of changing it from what we do, and so I greatly appreciate that. Also, totally fine whenever you're contributing something like this to leave these questions, and for other folks, you can feel free to leave the question in the PR, but it can be great to ask kind of ahead of time to just make sure that you're not going to waste your time on refactoring or what have you. Yeah, Florian.
Yeah, one question. So this is actually also going in the direction what the example provider repository already does, right? There are also multiple files actually, maybe not that detailed, but I think it's the same approach or idea.
Yeah. Okay. Then there's already kind of precedent there. Yeah.
You did it, Brooks. You did the example provider, the custom provider, remember that you did a while back?
Oh yeah, like 3 months ago. That was like 20 years ago. I don't remember doing
Right.
that. That one was you're talking about under examples. There's Rust and Go, but this one, right?
No,
Yeah.
yeah, in the providers. Yes, that one.
Yeah. Then we'll scratch that from the record and just say, yeah, that I think that's a great idea, and that's what we should have been doing this whole time. I do
Classic.
actually like to separate. It's okay. We'll edit that in post so that it'll reflect the same opinion the whole time.
Classic.
You just
Uh,
don't like it.
The what?
Saying that you don't like it?
Ah, I'm indifferent because I don't know how much the programming language will be on your way. I mean, like Rust, right? Because then you have to deal with different modules and stuff like that. And
Well,
two,
I saw questions on the chat recently, not long ago, which was actually bringing up which, a couple of providers, which one implements what, right?
yeah,
You need to look into the file to say that what has been implemented. This way, I mean, that's only one of the benefits of this. But again, I'm looking into maintainability and new
right.
contributors to understand the organization of it, not for us who kind of got it figured out by now.
yeah, no, I agree on that, and that's what I'm saying. Like I'm indifferent. If there's only one file, then I don't need to see where it's implemented. Just search into it. But yeah, I don't know. I don't care. At some point, probably it becomes too big, and yeah, split it up. It's just I always leave it to the team when it comes to that type of things. Like whatever makes them happy.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. It's kind of up to the implementer here, but um once you get to a certain point where it's like over a couple hundred lines or something, that feels like the right time to break it out.
Yeah. For example, like if I move it into different files, and this is like me, like Rust skill issues. But
Mhm.
if I move into a different files, do I have to go back to the main file to see stay machine there, like stay of the object, or not really? Everything is just cohesive to that file. So,
Um,
You want me to answer that? So of course, because the provider is separated from the interface implementation, just for static functions, that helper functions basically that I want to be used, I implement them in the provider and reference them in the interface. But other than that, everything is cleanly isolated.
yeah. Well. Uh,
awesome. I think we probably talked that one out. That one good. I'm really looking forward to seeing your PR, Masood. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to try out Wash Dev, but just to let you know some of the impact of what you've contributed. Like the Nats KV provider is the default entry point for everybody writing wasmCloud now. When you're doing the Wash Dev loop, if you have a dependency on key value, like that's what we deploy. So um, and that's been working. It's been working out great. I mean, the ability for when you run Wasm Cloud, you're going to have a little NATS infrastructure, which we already provision. The ability for that to just exist is really awesome. So to have the NATS object store as well to kind of step away from, everybody has a local file system, but to throw that in NATS too, we can we have a really good opportunity to keep reusing that same infrastructure.
And that example is it wants to leverage that. Sorry, I kind of went blank. I wanted to make a statement about the wash dev. I saw your responses to a detail and how we can leverage running our custom hosts. But the comment that I wanted to make is actually to the community. If you want to be good users of wasmCloud, you should look into components. Of course, all of us are users, but if you want to understand the platform, then you need to start looking into providers. They provide great insight into the inner workings of the system and how things tie together.
I was trying to find the emoji, but I will second that.
Yeah, actually, now probably is a good time. Sudhanshu, we met at KubeCon, right? You came to the
Yeah.
wasmCloud Contrib Fest, contributed an issue, all that fun stuff. But this is, as far as I know, your first community meeting. Would you like to do a little introduction, what you do for work and kind of why you found wasmCloud and why you're here?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sudhanshu. I'm a software engineer based out of New York City. By day, I'm a full stack engineer working on web apps. By night, I'm trying to become a Rust dev. And in terms of Wasm stuff, so I was at the Wasm Summit, and a talk I really like was mentioning that you could write your async code in JavaScript and consume it inside of Python using Wasm. I was like, oh my God, that's so mind-blowing. And then the Lego bricks thing, we just build things up and chain them together and use it. Then finally, the American Express, if I'm getting it right, they were talking about how they're trying to scale up serverless functions and using Wasm as sort of way to do it. So it looked very exciting to me. So I'm here trying to learn more and hopefully contribute to the project, help it move forward. At the same time, develop some Rust skills and solve my skill issues there. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming to the community meeting, doing an introduction. And yeah, normally we try to do those at the beginning of the call, but I think I just totally spaced there. So,
No, yeah, I was kind of late. You're right.
oh, come on, don't admit it. I know I'm just giving you the air cover. Okay. Anyways. Just to, speaking of the conference, I think the last thing that we can talk about officially in today's meeting is that the WasmCon and KubeCon session playlists are now live. So we have this link from the community meeting. But if you go and take a look at either WasmCon 2024 or looks like this is everything in KubeCon, which you all should take a look at some of the keynotes because wasmCloud hit incubating. Actually, we do have a shout out or two somewhere in these keynotes. Maybe we could just find those. But for all of you folks who were not able to attend in person, who maybe you want to watch the American Express or the other talks that the American Express talk or the other talks that came from WasmCon, all of them are here freely available on YouTube. So would definitely recommend checking that out. We may do I think we'd like to do kind of a post show. Oop, lost my window. I would think we'd love to do kind of a post-show blog that just kind of reaffirms all of the different talks and mentions that we had from this KubeCon. But I think I've already kind of talked that one to death about how fun it was, especially the Contrib Fest session, which had a ton of people coming in and contributing for the first time, which was awesome. I can't wait to apply for that in Europe next year. Probably not any questions there on the talk side. But folks, I think now we're kind of at the free time for for the community meeting. Does anyone have any topics that they'd like to discuss around wasmCloud, WebAssembly in general, or just yeah, general ecosystem? Feel free to just raise your hand or come off mute now. The floor is open.
I think we need to let you guys go and start the tradition, get into costumes, check your waistline before the festivities start. Every Thanksgiving is like a food marathon.
Well, hey, I can't argue with that, folks. I mean, feel free to raise your hand as I'm doing this, and then I will stop. But thank you so much for coming out to the community meeting pre-Turkey Day. I will personally apologize for not buying a turkey suit and then wearing it on the call. Maybe next year we'll see where we're at. But everybody in the US, and if you're celebrating Thanksgiving, we're thankful for you, and have a great Thanksgiving. Otherwise, we'll see you next week for our regularly scheduled community call. Thanks, everybody.
Enjoy.